It's interesting, and I mentioned this. Our listeners are going to hear this twice, but I still feel so positive about vinyl. And I mean, I just bought. Don't tell her this. I just bought my 12-year-old daughter a turntable, like a Crosley, and some Taylor Swift records, and like she's 12, and that's what she wants, and like it's starting, and so it's really interesting. And I mentioned this to Paul when we were talking, that I was at a university, and there were kids who were who I say kids, like 19 years old, who were going through. There was like a traveling salesman there with like boxes of old vinyl, and there were hundreds of kids who were buying hundreds of dollars worth of records. And it just, to me, that was like a microcosm of what we're experiencing now, and hopefully continuing to experience. Of course, there's downfalls, but I'm just so excited and encouraged by that. I'm sure you are too.
Yeah, definitely. I think the thing with vinyl that's so funny in this current sort of resurgence is there's so many ways to fall in love with vinyl. There's so many reasons to fall in love with
Yeah.
vinyl, and it's often, I think, the thing that the old school vinyl heads, let's say, struggle with because they've been a fan of vinyl for 20, 30 years. And they're like, this is why I love vinyl. And this is the exact reason why vinyl is important. And then they're seeing kids that are getting into it via a Crosley turntable at Urban Outfitters, or via the merch table at at their favorite band's like hardcore show, at a small venue, or via, going to a friend's house and just being like, oh, this is a different experience to listen to music. This is just different. It's not about sound. It's not about anything, but it's just different and unique. And, I think as a society, we'll always look for like unique ways to do things. And, I mean, CDs were a thing and they had their pros and cons, and people moved away from those cons to go to streaming, and streaming has its pros and cons, and people are looking for another unique way. And it's like, oh, can I touch it? Can I actually slow down my ADD mind and put on a record? And like, how does that feel when I like remove the ability to skip and shuffle? So I think there's so many fun ways, so many fun reasons for people to experience it, and everyone's experience is different. And I think that's what I love about it. Yeah.
No, this is beautiful, and I really want our listeners to zero in on this. Something you said about there's so many reasons to love vinyl, and this is your job, and we're going to get into the history of Vinyl Moon in a second. But can you elaborate more on like there are so many reasons, because as an artist and as a record label, sometimes we're pretty narrow focused in saying we need to transfer this audio onto this format so that people can put it on their turntable and hear that music. That's like one of many. Like, can you kind of just blow that up a little bit more of like the many reasons? And Vinyl Moon obviously exploits those many reasons that people love vinyl.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think I'll sort of illustrate let's say fictional character know or can understand these people. There's let's say the old school vinyl head that I kind of alluded to. This is maybe someone that's like collect vinyl, audiophile setup, really into the sound quality, maybe more middle-aged, has a comfortable financial situation, maybe $1,000 turntable, lots of money invested into audio cables and speakers. And, to them, the warmth of vinyl, the audiophile experience is a huge part of it. So, what they love about vinyl is, related to that, audiophile experience. And then if we put them on one end of the spectrum, and then we just imagine that on the other end of the spectrum is, a college kid that's going to see a show, goes to the merch table, wants to support their favorite band. And, they're like, well, I don't know, these t-shirts don't speak to me, but here's this vinyl record. Like, I don't even have a turntable, but I want to support this band. Let me buy this record. And, this is now a way that I can identify with this music that means so much to me. I think we've all been there in our teenage years, or, where it's like you want to feel connected to music that moves you so much. And, that person may not even listen to that record ever, or for a while. Like, they might buy the vinyl before they even have a turntable, that might be that kind of gateway experience. And so, what drew those people to those mediums, to those records are so sort of opposite. But then you've got all the little notches in between, people that, maybe come for the art and stay for the vinyl, or they get pulled in by colored vinyl and they really love that. And, to them, the experience of looking through the artwork and putting on a beautiful colored vinyl disc is sort of more important than the audio quality. And each person has their own kind of internal rankings of like, well, this is what's most important to me, and then I appreciate these other things, and I don't even consider these other things, which is where we sometimes see people kind of butting heads in vinyl forums or in comments. It's like, no, this is why vinyl is important. Like, no, that's why it's important to you. But
Yeah.
there's many other reasons why people are allowed. It would be like saying that books are only for mysteries. Like the medium of books is only for mysteries, or only for fiction. Like,
yeah.
what do you mean you're reading a book that is nonfiction? That's not what it's for. Books are for fiction. It's just a medium. You know, there's so many things we can do on it. You know, I find it sometimes. I know I'm rambling here, but this stuff gets me excited. But I think sometimes it's funny to think back to the heyday of vinyl and remember that vinyl was also the medium for spoken word tapes. You know, comedy, it was also the medium for comedy. It was also the medium for learning languages. I have a couple records I found in thrift stores that are like learn Spanish, and it's you know, it's a whole kit on learning Spanish. And so it's just a medium that delivers audio, you know, and that can be music, that can be instructions to astronauts, that can be instructions to radio DJs. You know, the history of vinyl has just been it's just a delivery package. And you know, getting upset with what's on it is like, you know, getting upset with what somebody puts inside a cardboard box. It's like, you know, there's a million ways. There's a million ways to fill it. It's just a medium, and I think that's kind of freeing. And like, oh, well, how can we have fun with this medium? You know, what can we do? Like things that get me excited is usually my guiding light. And I think, well, if it gets me excited, then there's probably one other person out there that will get excited.
That's right. Real quick, can you tell us what Vinyl Moon is and maybe take us back to how it started?
Yeah, definitely. Vinyl Moon is a mixtape format vinyl record club. And I'll pause there and kind of go back to how it started, because I think that kind of paints the picture. So I started a music blog in 2009, was just writing about new music for years. And it was kind of my hobby on the side. And because of that, I was very much in the digital music world and listening to new music every day digitally. And so I kind of got into vinyl as a way to take a break from that digital ecosystem, you know, to put a record on my shelf and have that record looking at me and saying, hey, you like me, don't forget to listen to me. You know, don't let this album you love get lost in iTunes or get lost in Spotify. And so it was a sort of expensive and fragile and cumbersome way to experience music differently and remind myself of this difference. So anyway, I've also always been a big fan of getting things in the mail. And so I when I got into vinyl, went to vinyl clubs and was like, oh, what are the clubs out there? Like, I'd be curious to just help grow my collection. I subscribed to pretty much all of them over the course of about a year, and none of them really scratched the itch. For me, it got me excited. I had this thought, I was like, you know, it'd be cool if someone took like the spirit of a music blog and like turned it into a record club. Like that would be cool. Like I'd love to subscribe to that. Anyway, of course, you say that out loud and then the light bulb goes off, and it was like, oh, dang it. Like I might be half qualified to like for this idea, you know, like let me see if I can figure out the other half. So, you know, started researching, you know, I knew a little bit about vinyl manufacturing from working it for some record labels, but just dove into the technical side of the vision, and over time kind of figured out, okay, well, I feel like I know how the music's going to come together. What about the artwork? Like, you know, what should that be? And I was like, well, I'm not an artist. Maybe I can work with other artists and put cool artwork on it, you know. And a classic example of, you know, necessity is the mother of invention. I was like, well, we got to put something on these jackets, you know. Where can we get cool artwork? And so anyway, that was sort of the genesis of Vinyl Moon. It started on Kickstarter as very much an idea of like, I think this is cool. I wonder if other people will think it's cool. And so every month, you know, it's about 10 to 12 songs from new bands that, you know, we believe in or, you know, think deserve more ears, put together on a mixtape format. So there's a flow and a vibe. I hesitate to use any genre tags because it's pretty eclectic, but there's kind of a mood with each record. And then we work with a different visual artist every month to do really deluxe, usually over the top artwork packaging. And again, that kind of goes back to the idea that, you know, physical music is kind of irrational in this day and age. So if we're dealing with a kind of irrational thing that let's just lean into it. Let's take it to its, maximum, and, let's have fun with it. If we can't say, well, this vinyl is absolutely necessary to listen to music. Well, there's so many other mediums that you could choose, streaming, CD, cassettes,
Sure.
but we have this medium that's got a really big canvas, really tactile. So let's play with that canvas and let's play with that tactile nature. So anyway,
that's awesome. And so you're on your 100th edition coming soon?
Yeah, December is volume 100, which is
no way.
Madness.
So wow, that's incredible. Congratulations, by the way. I mean, honestly, I was thinking about it today and looking through everything you've done.
Thank you.
It sounds kind of exhausting. I don't envy you. Like a different 100 different artists, 100 different visual artists, and 100 different ways to stay creative, and then over multiple thousands of musicians. Like, good God, great, good on you, man.
Thank you. It is, it's a lot of work, I'm not going to lie, but I feel so lucky to get to kind of play in the sandbox that I get to play in, and collaborate with amazing musicians like yourself, who should be noted, or can be on volume 100. And it's been awesome to be able to collaborate over the years and feature your music and put your records in the shop. So I mean, that's like, I get to go to work every day and play in an awesome sandbox with like the best toys, that just show up there, and get to reach out and be like, hey, can I play with your awesome toys? And and other cool kids are like, yeah, you can play with our toys. Let's do something together. Let's play. And so, that's super fun. And I feel lucky to get to play.
How does the curation process work? There is a theme. It's kind of a little bit, sometimes it's a little buried, sometimes it's a little abstract. I've never really seen like a genre theme. Like I've never really, and it's interesting that you went this model, because first of all, most clubs were going the route of like featuring one record, repressing one record, or just pulling one record from existence and redoing that. You've done something completely different, which is the mixtape model. But if I were you, I would have kind of been a little bit more, less complex, and have just said, okay, this month is like top 10 jazz songs that I've discovered, and next month is top 10 hip hop songs. You've done something where, so can you explain a little bit of that curation process? Because it isn't as simple as saying this month is about a walk in the woods and everything sounds folksy. It's a little bit more, it's deeper than that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, in some ways it's deeper, in some ways it's sort of more straightforward, but it is true. I mean, I think one of the first things I realized when I started to reach out to bands and pull together songs was, from just a practical perspective, you can't have a vision for what you want before you start gathering the ingredients. It is, sometimes bands or labels disappear, don't reply to emails, say they're in and then they're not in. So it's not as easy as sort of like looking at a recipe, looking at the ingredients list, and then going to the store and getting those ingredients. It's more of like opening your fridge, seeing what ingredients are in there, and being like, I wonder if there's something that fits.
I get it.
So in that way, it's the similar spirit of like running the blog for so many years. I'm always digging for music that I really love and it resonates with me. And then if it's a great song and I believe in it and I think it should be on vinyl, then I invite that band to Vinyl Moon. When everything is sorted and they've agreed and we've done the license and I have the high resolution audio files, then that song goes into a pool. And that pool is essentially, let's say, the fridge.
Oh, so I see.
Once there's, a handful of songs in the fridge, in the pool, I can look at them and see if there's something emerging. And that's sometimes where it gets fun and even surprising to be like, oh, this kind of like folk song and this, SoundCloud rap song, I wouldn't have said, let's put these together ahead of time. But now there's a sort of maybe a thread emerging where what if we can thread these two songs together by putting other songs in between? What if we can kind of create an arc or create something linear and take the listener on a journey that might have a left turn and a right turn, an up and a down, or it might be more of a gentle arc. And I think that is part of what makes it interesting after 100 volumes is sometimes I can have an idea. Oh, I think we're dealing with like a mellower record, or maybe this is a more kind of guitar based, jangly, rocky, upbeat record, or maybe it's a dancier record. And, I think those end up being sort of the genres, if you will, is like, what's the energy like?
Right.
Are we mellow? Are we chilling out for this record? Or are we like kind of, doing laundry and running around the house and trying to be pepped up for, high energy or something like that?
The other question I had was like, you obviously don't necessarily go genre based, but did you draw any inspiration, or do you see similarities to like the Spotify playlists that are like a walk in the woods that are kind of abstract, or like wake up slowly, these kind of things? Do you see similarities there?
Not really. I think that, kind of going back to like what's available out there in the world, like there are ways to scratch that itch. Like if you want to go to sleep playlist, or if you want to study playlist, there's ways to take that idea, I need that, and then find a solution for that. And I think what I've always tried to do with Vinyl Moon is give people something that they don't know they want.
Right.
And so it's another reason why I really hesitate to ever use genre tags, because I think we all can have, I think there's two problems with genres. One, there's no universal definition of what any genre is. So
that's very true. Yeah.
My idea of indie rock and your idea of indie rock might be totally different. So if I say to you, oh, I have this new indie rock band I think you might like, you could be like, but I hate indie rock. But we could be talking about totally different sonic experiences. So, I think using genres, I think, can sometimes turn people off as much, if not more, than it turns people on. And also, I don't want to define these genres. Like, I'm just like, this song is great, whatever it is, it is. And if there's a record that can turn someone on to a song that they would not normally have come across or searched or thought they would ever like, that's the win for me. And, some of the favorite feedback I've gotten from members is like, I love Vinyl Moon because it covers music I would never normally listen to in my day-to-day life. I remember one guy was like, I'm a metalhead. I listen to metal music recreationally, but that's why I love Vinyl Moon. Because I would just never, this is like imported candies from another country. It's just, they're not available in my local sort of shop.
Right.
I'm not looking for them normally. And so that's really fun to kind of push the boundaries of what people expect. And, hopefully there's a song on every Vinyl Moon record that someone's like, I don't know, man, I don't really like that song. Because then that, to me, is the opportunity for that song to grow on you and to be the sleeper favorite.
Right. Well, I guess what you're doing too is there's a lot of talk about snapping the algorithm, right? And kind of breaking that, we get to a place where Spotify could just feed us exactly what it knows we like, and that can create a problem. And so you're kind of completely stepping out of that, almost like radio used to. But even radio was homogenous.
Yeah, it's true. I think, and people again are often, how do I know if I'm going to like this? Or don't you want to know what I like, before you make the record?
Right.
Like, don't you want? And
Right.
No, there's so many places in this world where you can give your feedback, and algorithms are a perfect example. Like your actions are being read by the algorithm and it's being fed back to you. I am only concerned with what I like. And that's not for selfish reasons. It's for, it's the only thing I can sort of believe in and stand behind 100%, is like, I don't know if you'll like this, but I know I like it. And if that overlaps, if our like Venn diagram of interests overlap, that could be cool. But the overwhelming odds are we will not have any shared interests. And the majority of people on this planet will hate every song on Vinyl Moon. That's for sure. The odds are. But if there's a chance that you overlap with what I'm into, you might have a lot of fun, and in that sense, it's like, kick back. Don't worry about what you think. There's places to sort of go that route.
Sure.
All-inclusive paid vacation. You just show up and I made you a cocktail. We'll have fun. Okay, and you just let me know if I'm rambling too much. Obviously, this stuff gets me excited.
Yeah.
I can go off on a tangent.
Well, that's what podcasts are for. Like, I don't know about you, but when I go for a drive, I look at the podcast, and if it's 2.5 hours, I'm like, oh, phew. I don't have to worry about putting anything else on. Like these are people who are going to talk about this thing until I get to my destination 3 hours away. You know what I mean? Like it's nice whenever. Anyway, maybe my listeners are disagreeing when they're like, no, keep it short. Okay, so what have you learned about people's appetite for vinyl and music over the past 100 months? You've got to have some incredible data, kind of like Netflix knows what people like to watch. What's your data on people's tastes in vinyl? What kind of things excite them?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think, the taste in music, I think it's just hungry. People, there will always be a section of music enthusiasts that are hungry for new things. And that's not everyone, but that is some amount of people that want to discover new things. And some people want to just lean on old favorites. That's fine too. Yeah. When it comes to vinyl, I think, one of the reasons I started Vinyl Moon, and one of the things I still believe in today, is that I think there's a lot of room for more interesting and exciting and creative things that can be done with records. Kind of going back to Vinyl Moon is not a necessity. Vinyl is not a necessity. It's a luxury. So let's treat it luxuriously, and let's really have fun with it. I think I see that reflected in a lot of what people are into, and that's, really fun colorways, really, kind of deluxe packaging, reasons to want to pull a record off the shelf. We've all been there where you're like, oh, I want to put on a record, and you look at your record shelf, and, if you were half conscious during the purchasing of those records, you love them all. And you're like, well, I don't know, how do I choose? And so, but I think that there's reasons there that haven't always been the case. Let me say this differently. I think a lot more labels and bands are kind of leaning into the fun side of vinyl, and that disgruntles some vinyl purists, but that excites others, and that certainly goes back to the idea that you'll never please everyone. Any band knows that, any label knows that you'll never please anyone, and that's okay. Everyone, you'll never please everyone. Hopefully you'll please someone.
Well, let me ask you though, that's funny, that kind of segues into another thought that I had, because some of us as labels and artists, we just want our music on vinyl, especially artists who've never had their music on vinyl. That's kind of a rite of passage that everybody sort of wants to hear that moment. But when you tie that together with the fact that a lot of labels and a lot of artists don't have a big budget, we don't have a guaranteed audience for this vinyl, so there's a good chance we might have a few hundred copies in the garage afterwards. For that reason, we go really basic, right? Like we do just a standard jacket. We do maybe black and white labels. We do black vinyl. We do even a lightweight vinyl. There are these things, and I think that's becoming problematic. I think that there's music fans, their appetite have become more sophisticated. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I, as a music fan, like you had said at the beginning, we don't need this format. The music can get to us easier than through vinyl and cheaper than through vinyl. So I feel like there's becoming a bit of a demand or a responsibility for labels to do something cool with their vinyl package and to think of it as an entire package, not just as a black disc. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think definitely so. I think, the number one feedback I give bands when I'm working with them on maybe collaborating on a vinyl pressing is to, err on the side of maybe more interesting or more exciting. And, I think that comes from the idea that if you're making a decision because it's what you truly believe in and it's what gets you excited, then that's definitely the right decision.
Yeah.
But if you're making a decision because you're worried about the bottom line or nervous about maybe investing too much, then I think it's worth taking another look at that feeling and, running the numbers. And it's certainly something I haven't always been good at, and I think bands traditionally aren't good at. But, let's take a feature like colored vinyl, for example. Running an all black press of a short run of vinyl, maybe 300, 500 units, compared to making it just a one color vinyl. That's maybe $1 a unit more for, adding color, and, $1 a unit. So that's an extra 500, 300, $500 for the whole run. Which is not nothing, when you're in band. But when you think about a black vinyl record, maybe sells for, let's say 20, 25, but then a colored vinyl record, you could sell for 25, 30. The consumer has a comfort with colored vinyl costing a little bit more. So
that's right.
You're already looking at like, you're investing $1 for a potential $5 return. Or you invest that $1 and you keep it at 20, $25. And you have anyone that's coming across that record and is on the fence is like, well, that's cool. I get a colored vinyl record of this band I might be interested in. And so, I think about a lot of these things as ways to convert the on the fence fans, if you've got hardcore fans out there, they're going to just be excited to get your music on vinyl at all. And that's awesome. That's an awesome position to be in, to know that you've got, X fans that are just going to buy it no matter what. But there's so many people that are just perusing Bandcamp, or, might hear a song on Spotify and just wonder, hey, do they have vinyl? Oh, cool. They do have vinyl, but it's pretty basic black vinyl. So I don't know. Like I kind of bought a lot of records. I bought a lot of records this month. Yeah. I'm tapped out. And, any vinyl consumer can't buy it. We can never buy all the records we want. So we have to make kind of internal decisions on and so just thinking about what can you kind of like offer. And I think once that happens, it can sometimes be a fun opportunity. Maybe that's colored vinyl, but it doesn't have to be. I mean, that's certainly an easy bang for buck way to make a more sort of deluxe pressing. But, you could do stickers, you could do, Polaroids, you could do handwritten notes. Thinking about as any band or label with not a lot of financial, not a lot of sort of financial means, maybe there's more time than money, right? And so it's like, oh, can we write a little thing? I mean, we just did a record with this guy, Ryan Ritual, who it was his first solo album, breaking out from the band Mating Ritual. And, he wanted to do a little cookbook. He's been really into cooking. And so he made a little 12-page cookbook booklet, designed it himself. And, I think they came out to like $1 a unit or $1.50 a unit.
Oh, cool.
But that's the thing that he's been really passionate about. So that kind of like personal passion just comes across. Is anyone going to do those recipes? I don't know. It almost doesn't matter, because you get a vinyl record that comes with a little cookbook, and that's just like, I don't know, that's just so fun.
We're kind of trained for these little bonuses. I don't know if it was retail that did it or whatever, or maybe it goes back in our evolution, but like these little times where even when I buy an old record, like a used record, I'm in the habit now of looking inside it just in case there's a ticket stub. Or I got this record, and it was a bootleg, and somebody had handwritten all the titles and the track count. I think it was somebody in their collection, and they like to put it in the plastic and put it on the front just in case you can't decipher on the back. And it was like somebody's OCD way of organizing their collection. And I thought, what a cool little historic thing that somebody did this in the 70s. And I don't know. I just think we're trained to kind of like look for the Easter egg in everything. Yeah.
I think I really like the idea of what you touched on, which is like somebody's handwritten note, because I think that sometimes the vinyl, world kind of forgets that these things were meant to be used. There's a lot of focus on like keeping jackets pristine and don't touch the grooves. And did you use the highest end mobile fidelity inner sleeves, anti-static? Do you treat your records with lasers before you put them on your turntable? And it's like, there's nothing wrong with that, of course. But I also think there's nothing wrong with like using a thing that's meant to be used. And,
that's right.
If you're getting a lot of joy out of the thing, then what's wrong if the jacket wears because you put it on the shelf back and forth 100 times, or the vinyl wears because you touched it, improperly, and you got your oils on the grooves. But if that's what brings you joy, and that's the ultimate point, right? Is that we get to experience these things.
Well, people always talk about how if you use the wrong needle or this and that, it's going to wreck the record over time. And I'm like, well, here's a record I put on the turntable once a year, twice a year maybe. I'm only here for another 40, 50 years. So I only need it to work 100 more times, and then it can be destroyed till my kids throw in the garbage.
I should be so lucky to ever wear out a record. I mean, that would be like an amazing day.
Yes, please. It's so, that's so true. Yeah. Wouldn't that be nice if like you could do a Spotify Wrapped where it's like 3 people wore out your record this year to the point they need to buy a new one.
Right. Yeah. That would be a really fun way to like slice that data. Yeah. And again, I love drawing parallels to other things because I think it's always illustrative. But the sort of like care for your record argument, it's sort of as if you bought a new car and someone was like, oh no, you can't drive on those roads with your car. You have to only use these roads, and you have to download this special map navigation software that will guide you to roads with no potholes and roads with no cracks. And which roads have been paved the most recently. Yeah, it'll take you an hour longer to get everywhere, but like your car will be better conditioned in 5 years. And you're like, that trade-off might be right for some people, but it might also be not right for others.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Well, let's talk about the going back to the package. And I know, I assume, and I know a little bit that you've kind of pushed the limits of some of the pressing plants over the years. And I want to ask you about this specifically. And I mean, this is just an example in my mind, but years ago, and I think it was actually the band you mentioned, Mating Ritual, did like a rectangle label as opposed to the standard, what is it, like 3.5 inch or 5 inch circle. And I always thought that was the coolest thing ever. And on my last record, I contacted the plant and I was like, I really want this. Like, I don't care how you do it, but this like minimal approach, or God forbid, no labels. Like I really want something minimal. And you know me, I like to go as minimal as possible. And then of course I was like basically asking them to perform like to cure cancer or something. I don't know what the issue was there, but it was a hard no. But so I'm curious, like, because you have this responsibility to get people excited month after month for 100 months and beyond, you've got to be in that kind of entrepreneurial Steve Jobs innovative phase of saying, hey, what about if we did this, but without any jackets or without any labels? So can you tell me about some of your adventures in that type of off-roading, to use your own analogy?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's one of the most fun things to be able to do is push the boundaries and be like, that's why any pressing plant, I work with, can probably testify to this, but I'm always asking a million questions because I don't want to know what they did before. I don't want to know how it was done before. I want to know how it's done anything at its core process, because that helps me understand where the limitations are. And, to use the die cut center label example, that's something that I've, learned, like which plants are willing to touch that idea, which plants are not willing to touch that idea, which kinds of machines that can be run on. And most specifically, or most importantly, at what times in the vinyl industry's sort of busyness or not busyness is that possible? The times that we did it, I came back and wanted to do it with that same plant a year later, and they were like, no, my pressing manager says we're not going to do that. I'm like, but we did it last year. He's like, yeah, but things are so busy right now that it's a riskier thing. Anything that's riskier, pushing the envelope, they're like, we can't risk it. He said no. And it was like, but we did it. Like, I know it's possible. Anyway, any business has to draw the line in the sand.
Funny.
So it's something that I was like, okay, fair enough. And that's where I'm a big believer in building long-term relationships with pressing partners, so that, if they ever are going to like push the limit or do something a little bit outside of their comfort zone, it's like, come on, I'm your guy. We do this a lot. Let's have some fun here. Let's do some weird stuff. But yeah, I love I love playing with the medium, and I love doing things that are unexpected. And it means a lot to hear that you love that square center label, because I think sometimes we don't even talk about it as much as we should. There's fun things that we do that then the next month happens, and the next month happens. But I don't know if I've answered your question, but it's I'm always thinking about what can I like Trojan horse into a record package. Like, it's fun, it's flat, it can be reproduced. We can make a bunch of them. We can kind of slide it in, and are you getting
I know that innovation can happen in the jackets because it's a completely different industry. It's paper, and honestly, it's not. There's very little integrity to worry about as opposed to the medium that's holding the music. We've done some fun things with die cuts. I still love looking at that project we did, and I was looking through your website, and you've done even more with die cuts, which is really cool. From the vinyl perspective, I mean, there's the label, there's the color. Are you kind of running out of ideas? Is there innovation happening at the plant level? I see sometimes plants say, "Hey, we have these 5 new colors," and I'm like, "Okay, cool." It's like a different turquoise. But like, how are you?
Right.
Are you actually pushing these plants, and are you still excited about the future of being innovative with vinyl?
Yeah, definitely, it's exciting. But sometimes it doesn't pan out. I mean, sometimes it's like, hey, I want to put these 2 colors together, and they're like, okay, we just coincidentally never put these 2 colors together. We don't know how it's going to react. And I'm like, well, I don't know. Let's try it. Let's do it on a run. Sometimes it comes out awesome, and sometimes it's like, oh, those 2 kind of got muddy together.
Yeah.
And again, lucky enough to work with some pressing partners that are sometimes willing to do test runs,
Cool.
and try out some blends before we go to the full press. But sometimes we just take a swing and it's a hit, and sometimes we take a swing and it's a miss. And I think that's one of the things that over the 8 years of running Vinyl Moon, you were saying, oh, it's a grind, and it there's so much, and it's true. But one of the benefits is there's always a next next month.
Yes,
so there's been things that have been misses, and it's like, let's not dwell on it. That didn't come out exactly like we thought, but now we can learn, and I'm lucky enough to have a new distraction the next month, to play with.
So give us some advice for the indie labels who are pressing vinyl. I mean, you're a vinyl fan. You work in so many parts of the industry. There must be times where you see an artist that you like release a record and you feel disappointed in their vinyl offering, or you might be in a record store and go, "Oh my gosh, what a missed opportunity," whether it's a major label or it's an indie artist. So can you tell us some of the mistakes you see or some of the missed opportunities you see indie artists make with their vinyl projects?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think kind of touching on what we were talking about before, which is, something special. Vinyl is a special medium. It's unique. So I think that every vinyl release should have some consideration given to it. A few years ago, this is less common now because CDs aren't made as much, but it was common to see vinyl records that were clearly just enlarged artwork from the CD.
Yes.
And so sometimes that would even mean that the images were pixelated. Which is, of course, you don't want that. Anything with print, you want to make sure you have high resolution images for printing on a large canvas. Yeah. But I think more commonly it would be you're looking at a record jacket that's this big, and the track list is like this massive
I'm
font.
so glad you said that. I've said that before too. So bizarre. Yeah. Or barcodes that are like this big.
Exactly. And it's like, okay, you designed it for CD and then you enlarged it for vinyl. And, I think for a long time that made sense to have vinyl be the afterthought. Yeah. And I think, now I hope, and I imagine it's true that a lot of people are designing for vinyl, and, CDs, if they're being made, are the afterthought. Yeah. But I think, that you have a large canvas. So, always just be asking yourself, what can we do with this canvas? Maybe the front cover is solidified because, that's what's going to be on Spotify, and that's going to be in a lot of places. But okay, at a minimum, we now have a back cover. Can that back cover contain more artwork? Can the back cover expand the art world of the front cover? Can the center labels expand that art world? Can we use these kind of visual canvases, because they are, there's at a minimum, a vinyl record has a front cover, a back cover, a side A label, and a side B label. So that's 4 canvases, 3
and a spine
more than the front cover to play with.
Yeah, that's so true.
Say that again. I lost you.
Sorry, I said and a spine as well.
Yeah, exactly. And so font. Playing with fonts, playing with images. And I know that can be sometimes scary for bands or labels of, well, I'm not a designer and I don't know. Yeah. What's the right path? But like any blank canvas, you didn't have a song and then you wrote a song and now you have a song. You didn't have a record jacket designed and then you played with it and now you have something. It's just I think there's some really fun opportunities to, to add to the actual finished product. And then the next thing I'll kind of say is a lot of this is a great opportunity for storytelling. I think, you as an artist and as a label owner, know the value of storytelling, and I'm kind of bringing people into your world. And, making a record it's an endeavor. It involves a ton of steps, designing the artwork, getting test pressings and listening to the test pressings. And I think those are some really fun places to, post about, tell stories about, post, on Instagram or newsletter, email newsletter, whatever your medium is. But to use that, you're creating a new thing, and there's physical touch points, and kind of pulling back the curtain a little behind the scenes of how it gets made. I think gets any fan is into that stuff. I can't, or at least I am. Maybe I shouldn't say any fan, but it's the kind of stuff that you're like, oh, that's so cool. Like, how stuff gets made.
Well, one of the things when you're talking about visuals, one of the things that I've always felt helpful to pull myself out of the screen is to, if I'm working on an album cover or thinking about a color of vinyl or both, to put it on one of those Photoshop mock-ups that we do, and to say, okay, well, that's what it looks like on a store, or in real life. Those two colors don't look good together, or, oh my gosh, now I think this is really cool. We should do an Obi strip, those kind of things. I feel like it helps if you have an opportunity to zoom out, or even maybe print a proof at FedEx and take a look at it at home.
Absolutely. That's a really great point. I think seeing things at full scale is really helpful. And it's something that, I've even done a handful of times in collaborations with Vinyl Moon, where I want to show an artist, like, let's just look at what it looks like printed out, and because sometimes that definitely changes things. Even for me, sometimes I need to see it printed out. I've done this hundreds of times, but I'm like, but okay, this is going to be really helpful for me to print this out.
Yeah, totally. This is a dumb question, but I asked it to Paul, and are you long on vinyl? Like, do you see this future? We talked about it a little bit at the beginning. Are you hopeful that things will continue? I mean, the trajectory, it's going up, and every year we see new stats that it has gone up and up. Do you just think will continue and continue? Is there a future we can't even predict?
It's a great question, and I kind of have two thoughts. One is, I think that people will always love alternative mediums of anything, and I think particularly with music, where people will always have really emotional connections to music and want to experience it in different ways. And I think that vinyl will be around long. Absolutely. Will it have this level of interest, this level of growth? No. It will, like anything, it will ebb and flow.
Sure.
And it's something I worry about, is how the vinyl industry, and I think, this includes Vinyl Moon, this includes labels, treats the consumer. For example, I was a kid. When I was a kid, I was really into comics. So this was the 90s, during the sort of big comic boom of the 90s. And I was a huge comic book collector, would ride my bike to the comic book store every week and buy the new issues. And, anyone who was into comics at that time knows what happened. The comic industry got greedy, started releasing, multiple variants, special edition covers, limited edition. And they said, let's milk these customers for as much as we can. Similar thing happened in CDs, although maybe with less bells and whistles. But if an industry gets greedy, the customers will just stop buying. The comic book industry collapsed, the CD industry collapsed. Similar things happen with trading cards, and so I'm cautious of the industry moving towards higher prices without higher value.
Great point.
I see that a lot now, where when Vinyl Moon started 8 years ago, the average record was $20, maybe 25. And now that's shifted to a normal record, no bells and whistles, $30, 35.
Yes.
So that's a price increase that is vastly outpast, inflation or normal kind of growth. And I think that a lot of that I see with, reissue labels that are paying a lot of money for licensing soundtracks or
Sure.
things like that. And
Yeah.
they have to, well, for us as a business to exist, we have to add to the margin, add to the margin. And,
Yeah.
at a certain point, any consumer is going to just be like, hey, this is this luxury thing that I get to enjoy. And I dig vinyl, but there's a breaking point for all of us where we're like,
yeah.
Nah. And so, my internal compass with Final Moon is always like, let's try to keep this priced competitively. Let's always make sure that people are feeling like they're getting more than they paid for. So is Vinyl Moon cost more than the average record? A little bit, absolutely. But do you get 3x more than the average record in terms of value? That's certainly my goal. And so anyway, there's a little bit of a worry there, because I think it's natural in any industry that we're going to have ebbs and flows, and we're going to have people that pricing's too high, pricing's too low. It's going to happen. But if we as a community, and I will say like your sort of label community, if we're making sure that we're offering value to customers and making sure that they feel appreciated, then I think there's no reason why people won't continue loving this really fun and engaging medium that connects them with their favorite bands forever.
Well, that's a great point. And honestly, we have talked about this with so many different people over the past couple of months and over the past couple of years, and no one's really brought up that possibility of somebody ruining it. And obviously we know who that somebody is, but like, it is like, there's a legacy artist, has a new record coming out this Friday. And I feel like I got to get it because it's, an artist I follow or whatever, and it's a double disc, but it's double disc black, and it's $69.99 Canadian. So $70, which would be probably the equivalent of maybe $50 for you guys. But still, it's like, there might be an Obi strip, unless it's like just a marketing sticker or something. But still, it's kind of like there's nothing else really happening with this project. Why is it so high? And I think you're right. I think it will ruin it either on a conscious level where everyone will just say, we got to stop this, or just like slowly people will say, you know what? I'm just going to collect from this one artist. This is my favorite artist, so I'm just going to buy their records. Or I'm just, you know what I mean? Like, or I'm just going to buy used or stick with what I have. It can really eat away at the experience if all of a sudden you're buying this thing and going, oh my gosh, this is it's a very, very substantial purchase.
Yeah, definitely. I think, as a consumer, we always, when times get tough, if we lose a job or, our financial situation changes, as it happened for many people over the past few years, we first thing we check, well, what expenses are mandatory? I'm not canceling the water bill, but maybe I cut off Netflix. Maybe I cut off, HelloFresh. Maybe I cut off Final Moon. Maybe I buy less records. And so, with those kinds of limitations, vinyl, I think, will always be competing against necessities. Will always be competing against more efficient ways of listening to music.
Sure.
And so it's something to be careful with. Yeah.
I just caught myself. I kind of want to argue against myself for a second here and give me your thoughts on this. But like, I'm grumbling about this $69 record, but there's a good chance. And I mean, there's from this same artist, I have a record that's 40 years old and I still listen to it very regularly. So there's a good argument that like us as music fans need to get used to paying more for music, especially physical music that we may keep for 30, 40 years, pass on to our kids and grandkids. It all of a sudden amortized over those years, $69 doesn't seem like that much money. And maybe the major labels are getting used to this renting music and they're making more off of these songs on streaming over the course of 10 or 20 years. So, and I certainly believe that music fans need to be paying more for their monthly membership to Spotify. I don't think that price makes sense for what you get. So I'm just kind of reprimanding myself for complaining that maybe these artifacts that you're creating that can last forever should cost that much. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really, it's another good point. If we go back to like that idea of like these are meant to be used and experienced, and if you get if you get 60 listens out of that record, over your lifetime, then
Sure.
yeah, hey, maybe $1 a listen is
Sure.
pretty good to,
Yeah, that's true.
experience that, right? I mean, it's double disc. Maybe that's an hour long, for an hour and a half kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's where everyone's got that internal kind of checklist they've got to go through of like, is this worth it for me right now? With the funds that I have and with the alternative entertainment sources I have available. I think something that was an interesting experience for me when I started Vinyl Moon is I thought, oh, Vinyl Moon's going to be really big in the big cities like LA and New York and, Toronto. This is, these kinds of like cultural hubs. And then as I was, packing records in my garage for the first few years, looking at every single shipping label, I was like, small town here, small town there, small town Alaska, small town Ohio, and it was like, oh, and I had this kind of realization, like, of course that makes sense. These are places where there are not a lot of options. Maybe they don't even have a record store.
Yes.
And so they're looking for, interesting experiences that have maybe access to. And I think that it was a good reminder to, everyone's different, right? Like somebody in a city might enjoy Vinyl Moon as much as anyone, but they also have a million other options to consider.
That's right. Yeah. No, that's a great point.
That is true for any.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
Yes.
Yeah. Continue.
Oh, I was just say, so any kind of to your point about this record, it's like that record may have a ton of value, but there's so many records to consider. We are inundated right now with options. And
that's true too. Yeah.
And that's, I think that can be overwhelming as a consumer. Anyone's walked into a record store and been like, I want to buy a record today, but oh brother, I can't decide, spend an hour in a record store, you just got to leave with nothing. Cause you're like, it's too overwhelming, man.
It's very true. Yeah, it's very true. Last question, I'll let you go, but I am a little curious about membership clubs. There's a few labels in our community that do it currently, that some of them will kind of advertise it over the month of December and then maybe start in January. Some people try it and then get overwhelmed or realize they don't have enough content to make it worth it for people. There's just different kind of mindsets on it. I wish it worked more for people. So I kind of want to work on an episode really to address it and to maybe look at some of the case studies of labels who are doing it really well. What have you seen working? Is there something a label can do with a small dedicated group of fans? Is there any advice you could provide us in this arena, or maybe tell us not to get into it, if a label wants to come up with some sort of membership that's like a Patreon, but maybe has a physical component?
Yeah, definitely. So the network was just a little choppy.
Oh, okay.
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. Did you get the question?
Okay. Yeah. The video was choppy, so I wasn't sure.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
The audio, as long as we're good.
My audio would be okay.
No worries.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's a great question about club value. I've definitely, watched and studied and signed up to a ton of vinyl clubs over the years.
Yeah.
And, I think the ones that, I think it goes back to the idea of making sure that you're giving some value and delivering something special to a member. Any club kind of by definition is a trust exercise. You're asking people to trust you. You're asking people to, give money up front. And so, that's a moment where you want to make sure that you're kind of over delivering on that trust and really taking care of people's belief. And so that's probably going to, at a minimum, require a lot of communication, a lot of clarity, a lot of expectation settings. This is what we're working on. This is what we want to give. And that has the added benefit of humanizing the experience. People, we love bands often because we like the people that are in them, and we connect with those humans. And I think that the same can go for labels. writing newsletters where you are talking about the personal experience, where who you are, what it's like, what's going on behind the scenes. There's room for storytelling.
Yeah.
But as a small label, to the point about vinyl specifically, I think, one of the smartest things I've seen done, I think Sub Pop, speaking of your analogy, does this, which is, a club where you get a specific color variant that's just for members. So you're joining the club, and you're getting a record of the month, but it's a unique variant that's just for those members. And when you're pressing vinyl, that's one of the easiest things to break out, is to do a split. So you're pressing, that could be a 500 records, but you're doing 100 of them in a different colorway that's only for club members. And that is not a huge added cost. Most record plants can handle that. Any record plant that does small runs will probably be okay with that. And so being able to offer someone, hey, you like this label, you might not like every record that we do. You want to support us, we appreciate that. And we want access to a community hang or something like that with the band. Sometimes these things can be offered and people might not even show up for them, but just knowing that you're like, oh, this is cool. Like, I feel I'm supporting this entity I believe in, and I want them to exist and keep going. And, that means I get some bonuses, some tactile bonuses, but then that might be access. I think any label, what do you, I would say any label should ask themselves, what can we offer that's maybe doesn't cost anything? We're not paying for this item, but we could have a group Zoom call or a group hang, or, there's so much kind of collaborative stuff like that. The technology to invite people in, maybe a special newsletter, a Q&A, I think that has added just things, again, to bring people together. There's labels that I'm still on their email list years now. I've maybe haven't bought anything from this label in 5-6 years, but the emails that they send are so personal and human that it's kind of like hearing from an old friend, even though I've never met them and I'm still not even a customer.
That's awesome.
But that's very appealing.
Yeah.
And it's sort of kept me following along.
That's amazing. No, that's great advice. I appreciate that. And that's something extra is, we may not be able to offer a color variant. We may not be able to offer some of these more expensive things, but there are things for free that we can offer, or for low cost. That's something to consider to add value to it. Very cool. We'll talk about that another day. Thank you so much for doing this. It's so good to chat with you, and congrats on 100 records that going out to your subscribers. It's so cool.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, it's been an honor. Thanks for letting me come on and ramble and share some stories.
Yeah.
It's been awesome.
We'll have to do it again soon.